Hey Seekers, and welcome back to the Hanged Woman podcast. I'm your host Julienne Irons, and this month we're exploring happiness through three powerful perspectives: practical, scientific, and energetic. So for our practical episodes, we had Mackenzie Stewart, who showed us how to move from fear to freedom, and Joel Drasner, who reminded us that happiness isn't something we have to earn, because it's who we already are. And Seekers, I am so excited about today's episode because we're diving into the science behind happiness with Dr. DeMarty Burgos, a physician and neuroscience enthusiast who studies the brain-body connection behind joy, well-being, and resilience. Together we'll explore how our brains process happiness, why emotions shape the way we see the world, and how everyday practices like gratitude and mindfulness can actually rewire our neural pathways for more joy. This conversation is all about bridging research and real life, giving you practical, evidence-based tools to create sustainable happiness, even during life's challenges. This is the Hanged Woman podcast, where perspective is power. Let's get into it. So Seekers, one of the things I've realized over the last year is that building a business can start to feel like you're constantly looking outside of yourself for the answer. Should I post this? Should I change my niche? Should I sound more like this person or that brand? At 3 of Cups Healing, the branding agency I've built with my sisters, we've realized that sometimes the biggest perspective shift is recognizing that the answers usually aren't out there. They're already within you. That's why we use tarot, intuitive energy healing, and strategic competitive research to help entrepreneurs uncover their authentic voice and translate it into a personalized brand guide that's rooted in who they truly are. Because when your brand finally sounds like you, everything gets a little easier. Your vision, your magic. Let's make it real. Together. Visit 3ofcupshealing.com to learn more and book your free consultation. That's 3ofcupshealing.com. Okay, let's get into this week's perspective shift. Well, DeMarty, I'm so happy to have you here on the show. I am parts excited, parts nervous. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for being here and being part of the show.
Thank you for having such a great topic to cover in your series. I'm so excited. Like, how often do we get to talk about the neuroscience of an emotion that we feel?
Right. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. So can you just share a little bit about your background and what drew you to neuroscience and studying happiness?
Sure. I started studying happiness about 10 to 15 years ago. I was a yoga instructor in college, and I had a client tell me that after taking my class 3 days a week for about 3 weeks, she said, I stopped having panic attacks. And that just blew my mind. And I was a neuroscience student at the time. And I just went and read all of the yoga neuroscience I could get my hands on. And it was like new science at the time, like research. And that lends itself to happiness. Of course, yoga is one of the things we can do to help ourselves emotionally regulate and improve that. So that just led to a whole journey. And then I was working with actually one of your guests, Raquel Visaga, and she also taught me a lot about happiness and how we can cultivate it and train our brains to be better at it. And I ate all that neuroscience up too.
I love that so much. So let's just dive into happiness. And let's start with the barriers. What are some of the barriers that we have when it comes to happiness?
Okay. So what I wanted to do is to kind of set the stage of what neuroscience is briefly and what parts of the brain are going to be relevant for today's neuroscience happiness topic. So that will help us go into what the barriers are. It'll be a whole lot more evident. Okay, so this is a mouthful. Get ready. The 5 areas of the brain that are relevant to happiness neuroscience are the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, the nucleus accumbens, the amygdala, and the hypothalamus. It's it's a lot of big, seemingly scary words, but hear me out. I'll teach you what these parts do with a story. Okay, let's take a deep breath here. Imagine your brain is like an orchestra. Visualize the conductor. The conductor provides a cohesive, unified vision for the music. Visualize the string section with the violins. That ties the music together by carrying the melody and the emotional tone for the orchestra. Now visualize the brass section, like trumpets, providing triumphant, uplifting joy, just bringing in the beat to a new level. Think about the drums, which act as powerful accents that drive the emotional arc of a piece. And lastly, the metronome, which establishes the tempo when they're rehearsing, ensuring that all the musicians understand the desired speed, allowing for synchronization. Okay. So here's the story I'm going to share. On a normal day, when things are going well, the music is balanced and beautiful. One of the most famous songs that anyone might immediately recognize is dun 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 dun.
Yes.
Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun, and so forth, right? We all kind of have that available in our brain. So I picked that song so that you can understand and relate that to the story. Have that playing in the background. Okay, now let's just say you're stuck in traffic. You're late for a meeting. And now you just saw your phone and your boss is calling you. Suddenly, the loud drums, your amygdala, start pounding, bom, 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 on top of the music that we were just thinking about. The pounding is danger, stress. Now your heart starts racing. Your palms are getting sweaty. Bang, bang, bang. The percussion is drowning out the previously perfect music that we were enjoying. Meanwhile, in the strings section, your hippocampus, they start playing their part, reminding you of the last time that you were late and how embarrassed you felt. It brought back a memory that worsens the stress of this moment of being late. It makes the music of your brain orchestra feel heavier. Now the brass section, your nucleus accumbens, sits absolutely quiet, waiting for a reason to blare joy and motivation. This usually lights up in your brain when you get a reward or achieve something. But right now, under stress, in this traffic jam, the brass section does not hit its moment. The metronome, your hypothalamus, is failing to keep everyone on beat. It's unable to slow your fast heart rate and your stress hormones because all that amygdala banging is too overwhelming. Let's take a deep breath. Right. So here's the good news. You can bring the orchestra back into balance, even in the midst of a huge emotional traffic jam. Simply taking a few deep breaths helps your conductor raise the baton again, regaining calming influence over your amygdala drums. Later on, maybe at your lunch break, you can go for a walk, get some sunlight. That gives you a serotonin boost. Finally, the brass section has something joyful to play. That's your nucleus accumbens, releasing that good dopamine. And when you share a laugh with a friend, oxytocin adds a tone of warmth to the whole song and your whole crazy morning. So in a very real sense, joy and happiness comes from helping your brain orchestra sound like a single harmonious entity, instead of sounding like a collection of soloists. So stress is part of the music, but it shouldn't take over the whole stage. Do you get that visual with me?
I mean, I don't think I've ever heard the brain and the different functions of the brain explained in such an easy to understand and relatable way.
Yes, yes. Okay, good, good, good. So that is a cohesive, healthy brain is able to experience stress and then bring you right back to center. And then you can think, like actually think. And that means the amygdala needs to calm down. When the amygdala can't calm down, we can't think. Our heart racing doesn't stop. It just gets worse. And that's how we get from 0 to 100. And then suddenly we make a bad decision that we regret because we could never actually get a hold of the part of the brain that makes decisions.
That's like the structure of how our brain functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is that the barrier that keeps us from happiness?
So there's lots of barriers, but all of these barriers that I'm about to list, they all come back to the ability of that orchestra to be synchronized. And when it's not synchronized, that's where most of us need help to get back.
Got it.
And because our just our culture, our stress levels are always so high, there's always distractions. All these things are chipping away at our ability to have a cohesive orchestra playing a cohesive song. So sometimes in some of our brains, we're trying to have a conversation, but there's banging going on at the same time inside. So we're dealing with the banging and then trying to be present with our toddler at the same time. How can I experience happiness if I'm fighting all this struggle that's internal that I'm not talking about?
Right.
Right. So let's go into that. So one of the things is negativity bias. When we're wired to notice threats more than positive compliments. So there's a study where people remembered one bad comment. One bad comment, even though there were 10 good ones. And so that's the one that is going to last in our mind all day long. So why is that though? Because the amygdala is too assertive in our brain. Okay. The next one, comparison, comparing ourselves to other people. And of course, social media leads to decreased well-being because of that. A lot of studies have shown. But why? What is this addictive nature that our culture has right now with comparing ourselves to the perfect mom or the perfect anything that we see on Instagram or social media? It's the amygdala. She be too buff. She's too buff.
She is so buff. Like, come on, relax.
She's strong, but girl, sit down.
Sit down. Yes. Is the amygdala just naturally strong, or is she lifting weights or throughout her life?
What an excellent question. The amygdala is in balance when we're babies. Okay. However, if we have traumatic childhoods or even a traumatic life while we're in the womb, what does that look like and feel like in the body? It's a lot of cortisol. So a stressful pregnant woman who maybe is escaping a war while she's pregnant and she's fleeing her country, for example, that's a lot of cortisol. And that cortisol is programming that baby's brain and nervous system for when they come out, because you're going to have to survive the way I am. So that little baby's amygdala is going to be a little bit more buff than another baby who had a peaceful environment.
Way.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, one study is interesting and close to my heart because I have a sibling with schizophrenia. And when I was learning about that, traumatic in uterus experiences, they have found a huge correlation with later on schizophrenia. And my mother is the woman in my example. She was fleeing the war in El Salvador while she was pregnant. People were getting murdered in front of her. On one occasion, she was 7 months pregnant, and somebody saw a pregnant woman on campus. She was at a medical school as a student. They put her on a motorcycle and got her out of there because the military tanks were starting to attack the students.
Wow.
And so she was fleeing something serious. And then right after that, she fled the country and came to the United States. That brother of mine has schizophrenia now.
Wow. So we can very easily tie back our high levels of cortisol to what was happening to our mother while we were in utero, while we were in her womb.
50 to 80% of our ability to be happy comes from that genetic line. So some people who are just happy all the time, they probably have a genetic set point that's a little higher than others. And there's more.
Please.
Genetically speaking, 2 or 3 generations back, that trauma can also be coded genetically, and we can have certain fears today that we can't explain that are actually connected to like our grandparents and their fears.
I don't know what that makes me want to cry, because it's like, I know we all have these fears that we just don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the fears we don't understand were programmed when we were babies,
Yeah.
especially from 0 to 2, or in the womb, or before us from past generations. So like they did a study on wealthy individuals, like multi-generational wealth, and they found that some people had a huge, like several generations in, of big fear of losing security, even though that's probably never ever going to happen with the kind of wealth that we're talking about.
Right.
But that came from the original people in their family timeline who created the wealth in the first place. Like those fears of losing, of not having enough. Another one is, how about when we get a new car and like you love the new car smell and your car is awesome and you get happiness and joy from that and pleasure because you're proud of yourself or whatever. And then like after a week, the car no longer brings you joy and happiness. Or how about when you get married and your partner's like everything when you're dating, and then, and then you're married and now it's like, oh, it's you again.
This is it. This is it.
This is it. This is all I get. This is
That's all
it.
That's all I got. Oh.
It's called hedonic adaptation. Basically, that we get desensitized from something that normally would bring us joy and happiness. But why? And we'll go into more detail later. But really, it's just that you're getting used to something. So, how do you hack that in the brain? You keep things fresh. So, if it's about your car, you can regularly get it cleaned. You can change the scent that you have in your car to trigger a new sensation in your brain once a week or every 2 weeks. So just keeping something new and evaluating it in with a fresh perspective every so often helps for things to not get desensitized. There's another one of over evaluating our own happiness. Sometimes they studied if we're too obsessed with being like, this doesn't make me happy, I'm not happy, and it's just a constant thing that plays in the background in your mind, that can actually lead to less happiness because it's distracting us from actually being present and it actually having happiness feelings. That's a barrier. Other barriers include psychological barriers like depression, anxiety, issues like that, negative states of thought. And another big one that I think will be really helpful for us to talk about is cognitive rumination. This involves repetitive passive thoughts that we dwell on that cause distress over and over and over, and it leads to like a downward spiral. And it's like a treadmill of like doom. And once we get on it, it's really hard to get off. And this is where resilience and all the things we're going to talk about today, we can use those to help ourselves get out of that.
Okay, so let's just talk about the elephant in the room, which are prescription medications for helping us find more happiness. What role do they play in our happiness?
Mental health prescriptions are a good resource to get the ball rolling when it's stuck. So, of all the barriers we just talked about, if you're coming from a space that's you're already feeling like, I never feel happy, I never get to enjoy things that I used to enjoy, it's hard to get motivation to get up and like go outside and take a walk just to get sunlight. So how can you possibly start all these wonderful habits that make you feel great if you're not even in the mood? So the mental health prescriptions do help you get it started. It's kind of like they provide the neurotransmitter like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin that it takes just to stand up and do it. Like just that initial motivation. So it is really helpful. Some people need mental health prescriptions for just a short time, and it's great. It helps you keep your job. It helps you feed your family, and then you can build skills and get away from the prescriptions. Some people, especially if there's like significant trauma in the past, might need it for the rest of their lives, and they will know that they will need it. It's going to be really hard because the brain gets shaped differently. Like our brains change based on the environments and experiences we have. And sometimes if the change is too significant, you're going to need the help for a longer amount of time.
Yeah, I just recently got off of Lexapro for being on it for 5 years. So I am finding myself in a space where I'm balancing anxiety in a way that I haven't had to balance it for 5 years. Over the past 5 years, I've been in therapy and I've learned new tools. It is very interesting, like feeling the anxiety outside of having a prescription drug to help me with it.
Feeling everything, although sometimes it sucks, is like a beautiful opportunity to check in with your amygdala.
I love that.
Think like the next time it comes up, be like, girl, why are you working out? Why are you so buff in there?
Take a nap, queen.
Take a nap. Exactly. And how do we do that? We're going to go over it. But really, the number one first thing you can do ever is just to stop and take a deep breath. And that's the number one way to interrupt the amygdala.
Love that. So, how do scientists currently define happiness? I mean, would we call it an emotion? Would we call it a state? Or is it something else entirely?
So, happiness, we have found through lots of research that it's not just a feeling, it's a huge, complex orchestra of moving parts that come together for us to feel different types of happiness. So one of the things is, how do you define and like measure happiness? There are chemicals, there are brain images that we can take. We can give surveys and people can tell us subjectively what they're thinking and feeling. But they were able to separate some interesting things like liking something versus wanting something. Now, this is interesting. Liking something is the pleasurable feeling we have when we bite into a piece of cake. That moment is, that's an opioid hotspot. I like chocolate cake. That moment of pleasure. Okay, but wanting that chocolate cake is a separate neural pathway. And what's interesting is that sometimes we want something that we no longer like. And that's what is fascinating, because that's like when we're on social media and we're scrolling and scrolling and we're getting nothing out of it. There's no dopamine happening. There's no opioid hotspots. We're just scrolling and we're not getting that initial pleasure that we used to, maybe at the beginning of whatever season we're in. And it becomes an addiction. It can lead to that way. So, or before it becomes an addiction, they would call it irrational wanting. And so when I find myself on social media, one of the first things I note is how I feel. And as soon as I feel bored and I'm doing that, I ask myself, what am I getting out of this? And then it helps me separate the liking versus the wanting. And then I'll be like, okay, I should do something that makes me feel better, like that has purpose. And then I'll stop. Or I'll be very specific. Like, I want to see babies laughing or whatever. And then I take my control back. Another cool thing that they've been measuring to define happiness is pleasure amplification. So that's a different neural pathway. And in the rest of our conversation, some researchers have found a way to amplify pleasure. So like when something gets boring to you, but it used to be great, how can we now reverse that and amplify? And something that used to be ordinary, like driving to the store, where can we find pleasure in just doing something that's automatic for us? And there's a pathway for that. And we can train it in our brains. And of course, there are several different models of happiness that have been used, and we can go over them. But the main point to take from that is that everyone has found that you can train it into your brain. You can improve upon something that maybe you've never felt before. You can actually start to feel it now.
How do we change these paths in our brain in order to cultivate these things?
One of the models of happiness that stands out as recent research is the ABC model of happiness, where they documented how we experience joy across the lifespan. So in the earlier part of life, like in your youth, it's about chasing pleasure, experimenting, ecstasy, youthful anticipation of something new. You want something. The second phase, when we're a little bit older, more like middle-aged, we're it's the avoiding stress phase. And that's how we think happiness is just avoiding stress right now. That's a different perspective. We're trying to escape stress and get relief. And just that little itty bit of relief is like, ah, that feels good.
I can relate. I can certainly relate.
Yeah. The problem with that is our amygdala. She is the stress police. She's the one that's always like, that's a threat. That's a threat. That baby crying is a threat. That car that cut you off is a threat. So now it's like we're always stressed out. And so this is a threat-focused system. And what are we releasing in our body every time there's stress? Cortisol. And cortisol has actions in your entire body. It's not just in your brain. It's actually making things worse for you when we have chronic release of cortisol, which is chronic stress. So how can we get past this threat system? Like, what's the next phase? Like, is there a way out of this? And yes, there is. It's the next phase, which they have found and attributed to older people more commonly, where we are now in a living state of just deep satisfaction, of just inner joy, of not needing that dopamine that we get from scrolling or chocolate, but of other chemicals in our brain like opioids. So our body makes opioids. We make endocannabinoids, and we start pulling on those other resources that actually provide long-term life-changing change, and they restructure the brain more strongly. Those are affiliated with feeling connected to other people, altruism, feeling generous. And it's just generosity is a whole lot deeper of a joy than like eating a bag of chips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the cool thing is all of this suggests that happiness evolves, but also that we can train it now. No matter where you are in your happiness journal, and the things that we're going to talk about today are the ways that we can train our brain to go toward a non-wanting, deep satisfaction, inner joy in our lives.
So, can you break down what happens in the brain when we experience joy?
Yes, there's lots of people out there who've studied exactly this, and they have these theories. One of them is by Dr. Barbara Fredrickson. She came up with the Broaden-and-Build Theory, where basically she found that the experience of joy itself initiates an entire cascade of effects that go beyond that one moment. So like how? It's not through the dopamine chasing, opioid small moments. It's through building resources in our brain through small things that we can do every day. Just little things. And let's say it's gratitude. We just sit there and enjoy a moment of a memory of a loved one. And then the rush of feelings that we get, that moment of rush of feelings actually creates long-term effects. So like next week when you have stress, this is actually helping that moment a week from now, because it's like building resources and putting them in the storage room. And so you're creating long-term help for yourself. So the way that she kind of described this is through broadening our thought and action reactions in our brain. So what does that mean? It's like saying we have the emotion and the thought, but what are we going to do after it? And so that becomes a whole lot healthier in the long term. So like when we're angry and we're amygdala and stress response dominant, it's really quick. We get angry, and then the action that we can take when we're angry is like one pathway, which is like, I'm just going to throw this whole thing away. I don't want to eat it anymore. Fine. Or whatever. It's very limited And there's no creativity, there's no creative problem solving there. Now, but if we're doing these small things every day to build long-term resilience, then, the joy, the interest, contentment, pride, love, all of these small things start to, they foster, they coach your brain to want more of it, to want more creative outlets, more social connection. So it's like an upward spiral, which is so cool because it's like small little things that we can do daily can actually help us want more of it. And this is how she kind of goes into building personal resources and resilience. So when we're fueled by joy, that leads to building enduring personal resources over time. Even during adversity, we can still find moments to be mindful and savor the beauty of that moment, even in adversity. And that's a skill.
That is.
Being able to build up to that one day, it's not as hard as we think, which is really cool, is what she's found. Oh, and the other cool thing about all this is that it actually makes your body healthier. Because one of the ways that they're measuring this is through your cardiovascular health. So, have you ever noticed that when you're really upset, your heart rate goes really fast? Blood pressure goes up, your breathing changes, like your body is responding to the moment. But if we're constantly amygdala driven, then we're more often going to be experiencing fast heart rate even when we're not upset. Even when we're chilling watching TV, suddenly your heart rate gets faster. You might feel anxiety, your blood pressure goes up. And these are situations where it's like, oh, you should take medications to get your blood pressure down because it's really unhealthy. But like to get to that point where your blood pressure is always high, it took like years of training it to stay high.
And you're saying that we can do small things every day to reverse that?
Yes, we can do small things every day to reverse that, have it go in an upward spiral where positive emotions lead to better physical and psychological well-being.
Okay. Are there any common misconceptions about like happiness chemicals like dopamine and serotonin?
I think because we're like our culture has not gone into understanding neuroscience. So like the word dopamine becomes like a meme and serotonin, and then we don't really know all that it does. But the reality is that both of those chemicals do a whole bunch of other things in our bodies, not just mood stabilization. They work in our digestive tract and in our sleep regulation, lots of other things. So dopamine isn't always good and leading to more happiness because sometimes it can lead to irrational wanting. It could be part of addiction. It's more about dopamine is more related to just drive and motivation. So when you notice that your motivation to do something you know you should do, and that motivation is low, you can think about your dopamine in that moment. What can I do to get my dopamine up? And then, it's a quick Google, natural ways to boost your dopamine, and it'll be like, go outside for a walk. Well, that's cool.
Go get some fresh air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another one for the serotonin, also that it's like a happiness chemical, but it's just involved in lots of other things. And so that's what I would say. There are things we can do to learn more about them.
All right, so we've talked about the science of it. Now let's get into the healing of it. We've talked about how positive emotions can broaden attention and build resilience. Can you just explain how that works for us?
So resilient individuals, they have found, utilize positive emotions to recover from negative experiences. So resilient people, just through observation and all these studies, they exhibit faster physiological recovery from stress. Like their cardiovascular activity comes right back to normal much faster than other people who are not resilient. That's one of the ways that we're measuring this. So what they did is they had a group of people who they put through a stressful situation, like being on a podcast. And they only had 10 minutes to prepare this long speech. And okay, so that creates stress, right?
I did not give her only 10 minutes to prepare. Okay, guys. Okay. I did not do that to her. Okay. I promise.
She did not. She did not. And what they found is that resilient individuals either naturally or have learned over time that, okay, there's a silver lining here. I'm going to build a new skill. I can take a deep breath. Oh, I'm so excited to see how I do because I'd love to improve upon this. They just have a better outlook during the adversity. And they are more likely to use humor to make themselves feel better. Here I am. Making jokes myself. There's relaxation techniques that people naturally do, like just, okay, I'm just going to take a deep breath, notice what my body is doing, and then I'm going to start my speech or whatever. And like optimistic thinking. So one thing that's interesting is that negative emotions narrow that moment so that you're going to only behave in a specific way, which is to attack when you're angry, escape when you're afraid. And resilient individuals are more likely to face the challenge. And they also think about things as challenges, not problems. Like setting yourself up, giving yourself that psychological edge really does make a difference.
I love that. This is a challenge. This is not a problem. This is a challenge that I can overcome, not a problem that's like attacking me or something.
Yeah. I actually learned at some time in my early 20s to stop using the word problem. And in my vocabulary, I almost never say problem. I always say challenge. Because a challenge is something you can overcome. It's something that you build up to. It can be done.
It's very empowering.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so how do these practices, right? We talked about like deep breathing. There's also like mindfulness. We talked about gratitude. There's like a loving kindness. How do these things actually rewire our brain?
They help you have better emotional recovery in the moment. And then they build the resources for future moments when you're going to need it. And then in the future moments, you're going to have way more resources available to manage small things. So one of the cool things is that I like to use to guide myself so I'm aware of where I'm at right now is if there's a level 5 problem, did I just respond to that like it's a level 7 or like it's a level 2? So, when we react much bigger than what the actual problem is. If that's something that you're going through, that's your amygdala.
Test that girl.
There she is again.
That girl, she
She's
lifted
so
her weights.
Dang it, she's so strong.
She's so strong.
So this is a situation where gratitude, mindfulness help. Why? Okay, let's say you are going to put yourself through stress, like a yoga class. You're holding that plank, and now you're in a safe place. There's no threat. Your amygdala, she's chilling. She's like, yeah, just hold the plank, whatever. But now the rest of the body's like, oh, this is stress. Now we can shine. And all the other parts of your orchestra love that. So they start to get strong. So now when there's a stress response in your body, like holding a plank, because that is stressful, going for a run. Now, the next time you get into an argument with somebody, the other instruments, the other sections of the orchestra, they're like, we know what to do. We practiced last week during that plank. It's so cool how you see how you're building resources for the future.
Right. We're not just going to the gym or working out or taking our walks or running to like be healthier physically. We're also doing those things so that we can have mental resilience when it comes to like challenging situations in our lives.
Yes, yes. So overall, they found that meditation helps people self-regulate stress, anxiety, chronic pain. They help the brain undo the negative emotions faster than before. And that's part of the rewiring, to just have a calm baseline before, during, and after stressful events. Practices like loving kindness meditation, they found significantly improved people's lives in like a short amount of time. So what you can do is just go to YouTube, type in loving kindness Buddhist meditation. That's specifically the type that they used in the research. And just do that like 3 times a week for a couple weeks. That's it. It's about building a sense of gratitude towards yourself and then towards others and then towards the world. And what do we feel when we have gratitude? Those beautiful, deep, non wanting, non dopamine chasing feelings, such as deep inner joy.
Mm.
Remember, we talked about the ABC model and how older people are more likely to just have, like, just sit in deep, thoughtful admiration of where they are in life
Yeah.
because they don't want anything.
Right.
They don't need to strive for anything. That's how that's what you're building up when you're doing things like loving kindness meditation. One of the cool things about gratitude is like, okay, let me think about what I'm grateful for today. And then, oh, I'm grateful for my parents. And when I say that sentence, my parts of my brain are starting to light up. The part that has memories, they're like, yeah, your parents. Remember that one time they took you to Disneyland, or remember that one time you had a rough day and your mom just sat with you and you cried and she just sat there with you. So that memory comes in when I do a gratitude list. That memory comes in and then I feel all warm and mushy inside. I'm like, yeah, my mom was so great. And then, remember that one friend who like came to get you because you ran out of gas? Yeah, I remember that. So all these happy feelings, they involve the entire brain when you go through them. And that's why gratitude, like a practice of gratitude, also really makes a significant change because you're using your whole brain, not just a dopamine hit like a bag of chips.
Okay, Seekers, I think this is a really great place to take a break. We'll be right back with the episode. Grief doesn't move in a straight line, and it doesn't come with a clear path forward either. Seekers, if you've experienced loss, whether it's a loved one, a pet, miscarriage, or another life transition, Healing After Loss was created to support you through it in a real and grounded way. Led by trauma-informed intuitive energy healer Julienne Irons, this self-paced course gives you space to process your emotions, understand what you're moving through, and find your own path forward with tools, reflection, and optional life support along the way. And because you're listening to The Hanged Woman, you can receive 10% off with code THEHANGEDWOMAN. Remember joy again and learn more at threeofcupshealing.com/HAL course. That's threeofcupshealing.com/HAL course. And the code for 10% off is The Hanged Woman. One of my favorite parts of building Three of Cups Healing with my sisters has been the perspective shift that branding isn't really about creating something new. It's about uncovering what's already there. That's why we combine intuitive tarot, energy healing, and strategic competitive research. Because we don't just help you build a brand, we help you discover what makes it uniquely yours. My sisters and I have watched clients stop trying to fit into someone else's idea of success and start building businesses that actually sound and feel like them. And y'all, that's where the real magic is. Your vision, your magic. Let's make it real. Together. Visit threeofcupshealing.com to book your free consultation. All right, y'all, let's get back to the perspective shift. Okay, so can you explain what the vagal tone is and how it plays in our capacity to recover from stress and experience well-being?
Oh, that's such a good question. This makes me so happy because I like neuroscience. Okay. Okay, class. The vagus nerve. It's a nerve called the vagus nerve. It goes from your brain and it's the longest nerve in your whole body. It goes super far and it's connected to everything: your breathing, your heart rate, your digestive parts of your brain, your muscles. It's the one most important system in your entire body. It has so many branches. So because it's connected to everywhere in your body, it is truly the mechanism of how we experience recovering from stress. So when we have stress, it's cortisol. It goes to all the same parts of the body and it's like, okay, I need to run. I'm getting out of my car, I'm parking, I'm running late, I'm going to run to work because I have a meeting, I'm running. But that urge to run right now and to like talk fast and to jump over the wall if you need to get there on time, that's the cortisol. That's a different part. That part of the nervous system is the sympathetic nervous system. It makes us go, go, go. It's known as the fight or flight part of the nervous system, which is really healthy and good. Because if you need to like catch your baby and they're about to fall into something dangerous, that's what's going to make you suddenly leap 5 feet across the room and like catch your baby. It's an instant reaction that you barely have control over, and it's just hardwired into us. So that's a good thing. But it's not good when we experience that all day long, because that's cortisol and that's amygdala happening, right? So what's the opposite of amygdala? It's the other system called the parasympathetic, is where the system, it's known as the rest and digest part of our nervous system, and that the vagus nerve comes into play. So the vagus nerve also, we can measure it by just like getting our blood pressure or like your heart rate. When your heart rate goes up, that's cortisol. When it starts to go down and back to baseline, that's the vagus nerve kicking in. So when things start to settle back down and you're back in a state of relaxation, that's the vagus nerve. So we can measure that. So we can put you through stress and then see how fast it takes for your heart rate to slow down. So for somebody who's chronically stressed, it's going to take much longer for their heart rate to come back down, even though they've been sitting here for 10 minutes. But why is your heart rate still at 120? But for someone who exercises regularly, does yoga, meditation, gratitude, they go through the same stress, and like in literally 10 seconds, your heart rate is back down to normal because you're sitting down now and there's no need to run anywhere. There's no stress on the way. The amygdala is not on high alert. She's chilling. So the vagal tone is how we recover from stress.
So what happens to the brain under chronic stress? And what can we do to counteract those effects?
We already know who is behind all this chronic stress. It's the amygdala. So what's happening is, imagine that the amygdala is turning on all the time, chronic. And it's starting to use up the resources of the brain more often, which I want you to imagine blood flowing to the amygdala. And that means it's flowing away from other parts of the brain, the other parts of our orchestra in the analogy. And that means it's taking resources away from the part of the brain that makes decisions, like your prefrontal cortex, for focus, planning, impulse control. It's harder to come up with creative problem-solving ideas. It's just not going to be available if you're in a state of chronic stress. So it's hard because when we're facing a challenge and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? And it's like the only thing you can come up with is like one or two ideas of what the solution could be. And neither of those ideas are great. It's like, dang it, I have no good ideas right now. And that's stressful when you're in the middle of a problem you need to solve. So what you can do in a situation is take a step back, take a deep breath, and give your prefrontal cortex a chance to come online. So if you just take a step back, like I said, breathe, notice that you're angry or whatever the emotion is, label it. And even just that break of just thinking a thought is enough time for blood flow to go back to the prefrontal cortex, and it'll help you have more creative ways to solve a problem. So the blood flow is an issue. The other thing that happens is that the memory and learning part of your brain, which is known as the hippocampus, with all of that flood of cortisol that it's always getting with chronic stress, it starts to shrink in volume. It's getting smaller. The high cortisol damages neurons there, and it's just making it harder for you just in life and in general to just form new memories, to learn new things, and to regulate your emotions, like probably how you used to be able to regulate them. Like it's just much harder and so much more effort and energy to just feel decent. And this is why. So, and a lot of times people would describe that feeling of just feeling foggy and forgetful. That's a sign of the chronic stress. We mentioned the prefrontal cortex where we make decisions. That starts to get weak. The chronic stress reduces neuronal connections there. So planning, focus, impulse control suffer. And the other thing that also decreases is all the neurotransmitters that we've talked about, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. Sometimes when the chronic stress is like too serious, or maybe there's like a really big, serious traumatic event, these neurotransmitters drop so low that you might get a diagnosis out of it, like PTSD, depression, anxiety, ADHD, any other diagnosis. And those diagnoses are related to drops in certain neurotransmitter levels. Okay, so chronic stress is not good. The amygdala, although she is powerful, does not need to take center stage all the time. She can sit down and take a break and give a chance for all the other parts of your brain. And we do this by just taking a deep breath, label the emotion, and then implement one of the many coping skills. And here's some of them that we could implement. Of course, exercise, we talk about that, but specifically aerobic has been found to make the biggest changes, not, and I'm saying that because like not weight training. Weight training is good. Yes, it increases your heart rate, but aerobic exercise is unique in that it significantly can boost your dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, all these hormones that directly counteract stress hormones. Okay, so what they found is that also in MRI studies that the hippocampus, which is where learning and memory happens, it actually starts to get big again. Yay! I knew where my keys were. My hippocampus is growing back. So that's what's happening. Exercise is just like a big hug for your hippocampus, for it to grow and like be healthy again. You can do 30 minutes at least 3 times a week of moderate to rigorous aerobic exercise, and that has been shown to make big changes in the brain. Also, mindful meditation lowers the amygdala activity, right? Like, girl, sit down, amygdala. How though? She has such buff legs from standing up and screaming all the time. So let's just take a deep breath and be calm. And sometimes it's hard to start like mindfulness and meditation because we're so used to having an amygdala that's just banging on these drums in our head all the time. And it's like, how can I just focus for like longer than 30 seconds? And it's hard, but even if you can do 5 seconds today, maybe by the end of this week, you can do 10 seconds of mindfulness, meditation, yoga, something that gets your brain to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the restful vagus nerve that we want to improve for our body. So even if you just do like 10 minutes a day, that's a lot. Find like a YouTube video of a 10-minute guided meditation. Just pick one. You could do it before bed. You do it right when you wake up, whenever you have a chance. Do it in your car before you go to work, like walk in. There's, just find a moment, put in the effort, and it will pay off. Pinky promise. The other thing we can do is increase social connection. This releases oxytocin, which starts to decrease the effect of cortisol, and it calms the amygdala down. One of the amazing ways that we get a huge shot of oxytocin is after giving birth to a baby. So there's a lot of oxytocin that helps the baby get out. But then postpartum, when you have a really stressful life with a newborn, the oxytocin that you get from just holding your baby, breastfeeding, all of these levels start to like flood your brain, and suddenly you're like on cloud number 9 because you're struggling and have all these things you're dealing with, but at the same time you're holding a baby and all you can think about is just, wow, I have a baby, and it's so much easier to be in a state of bliss and enjoyment. Is the oxytocin. So you can also get that just by sitting next to your partner, having conversations, giving someone a hug. Sometimes you just need to give somebody a hug. You can hug yourself. Did you know this? You can just, I'm hugging myself right now. Just hug yourself, hug your amygdala, get your oxytocin on. You have the power to do that with just hugging a friend, your child, playing with a pet. It helps to reset the stress circuit. Okay, sleep. During sleep, cortisol naturally drops and the brain cleans house. So you know how like on your cell phone when you never turn it off and like all of that temporary memory just like builds up and then one day your phone's like can't send a text message because it has too much temporary memory just clogging up however my phone works. It happens with computers, it happens with phones, and it's like you gotta turn it off. It's like a good habit, like a maintenance habit to just turn off your phone and your computer. And the same thing is with the brain. You gotta turn it off. And chronic bad sleep mimics the same effects as chronic stress on the brain. That's a tough pill to swallow. I'm a mom of a toddler. Sometimes I just don't get good sleep. But sometimes I just want to stay up. I just want to stay up because I'm like, yes, I get a whole like 2 or 3 hours to like not think and be by myself. But then I end up with less sleep than what my brain actually needs. So that's an opportunity for us to take a deep breath, give yourself a little bit more sleep, and then tomorrow you'll start to feel the differences of just a brain that's flowing smoother, able to solve problems smoother, going through from one phase of the day to the next. And of course, getting nature and sunlight. Spending time in green spaces lowers amygdala reactivity, which they found in fMRI studies. So this is good. Just look out the window, you're on your phone, put a picture of a plant on your screen, like make your wallpaper. Find places, put an effort to find green, bring the outside nature world into your world. Whether it's a picture, put it on your wall, put it on your TV, step outside, get a plant. The other cool thing I really wanted to talk about that definitely counteracts and is just incredible for your brain is finding an activity that gets you in a flow state. Flow state is so cool. They've been studying this for a while, but now we're just more sophisticated with how we measure it and identify it in the brain with all these cool, fMRI images that we're getting. So that's flow state is that sweet spot where you're so absorbed in what you're doing that time seems to disappear. The psychologist who coined that term, he's known as the father of positive psychology. He studied artists, athletes, and musicians, and all of them talked about, I get in the zone. So find an activity that gets you in the zone. It's when you get a challenge and you have the skill to meet the challenge perfectly. So like what you're doing is hard enough for you to stay engaged, but not so hard that you panic and want to give up. What happens to the brain during flow state? The prefrontal cortex, which is the conductor of your orchestra, is quietly powering down a bit. That means like less thinking. And that's why you lose track of time and you stop overthinking. And suddenly an hour went by, but it felt like it was 15 minutes. What's also happening in flow state is dopamine gets released. And in this scenario, it starts to sharpen your focus. It is still related to motivation and pleasure, but it's also helping sharpen focus for the needs of the moment of the challenge that you're getting through. Endorphins, they are also released, which is awesome because they reduce pain and they increase pleasure. And this helps you keep going longer with whatever this hobby or flow state activity you have going on. The brain's default mode network goes offline and it lets you be fully present. It's kind of just like there's no more thinking, there's no more planning, there's no more feelings getting in the way. It's just like everybody just sits down and you're just present and you can be fully there, immersed into the activity you have. Examples of this is just athletes feeling like their body is moving without effort during a marathon, musicians improvising on stage and it feels like the music is playing through them. People have described this in lots of interesting ways. But you can do this by yourself in your house with gardening, cooking, solving a puzzle, and suddenly, boom, it's like when you're in it, you might not realize or think about that you're in it because you're in it. It's a pretty cool place to be. And why does flow matter for happiness? It just gives a sense of mastery and meaning to your presence. It's linked to the increased dopamine, which is reinforcing motivation and joy. There was this research since like 2020 that shows people who regularly experience flow state report higher life satisfaction and resilience. And this one's significant because it was during COVID lockdowns. And flow helped people buffer against the crazy stress that we all went through. So that's a cool piece of updated science. Those are some things that you could take away with you today on why chronic stress is not good, but there's a lot we can do about it. And just learning about the amygdala can make such a big difference if you just start to help your amygdala out a little bit. Everyone benefits. You benefit. The people around you benefit. Your nervous system starts to change, and that changes your perspective of the world. Your worldview start to change. Things feel lighter. The world seems like a healthier, happier place when you're just feeling better. Yeah.
So, DeMarty, I know that a lot of us struggle with deeply human moments when we simply do not have strength left to imagine that happiness is even possible to experience. I know that I've experienced this before in the past with things like suicidal ideation. My therapist calls it passive suicidal ideation. What advice do you have for those of us that are struggling with something like that?
If happiness feels so far away from you, as if it's like impossible to experience, or maybe like you don't deserve to feel happiness, I'm suspecting you might be struggling with depression, addiction, possibly thoughts of ending your life. So hear me out. The neuroscience research looks pretty good. On addiction recovery, it demonstrates that the brain has a remarkable capacity for healing and rewiring itself. This is known as neuroplasticity. So, for example, in substance addiction, your brain's dopamine reward circuit gets hijacked. And that makes it way harder to experience basic pleasure from food, socializing, like friends and family, doing hobbies that you normally like. And in recovery, the dopamine system can be repaired. So that's good. But remember earlier we discussed using alternative happiness pathways where you don't have to chase dopamine. So that's going to be your main way out. In depression, there are neuronal circuits we didn't even talk about that drastically improve in recovery. So you have plenty of options in your brain, like right now, to get you feeling better again. It's simply a matter of getting the right help as soon as possible. In recovery, you'll notice that your prefrontal cortex, which is where you make decisions, and your hippocampus, which is where we have learning and store our memories, those two places start to get stronger. And they tag team. Finally, they can stand up to your amygdala. Like somebody grab a chair and tell that amygdala to like sit down and catch a break already. Amygdala's been taking over for the whole team and it's time to just stop. The suicide and crisis lifeline number is 988. You can call, text, or chat. You can also find a therapist, psychiatrist, treatment center, support group at psychologytoday.com. One of the cool things about that website is that they have filters for specialty, ethnicity, language, faith, type of therapy. Nice to know. Overall, happiness isn't that random. It's biochemical. And today we talked about how you can train it. Even during hard times, your brain can be rewired for happiness. So remember, what you do today rewires how you feel tomorrow.
All right, so you've mentioned microacts of joy like kindness, savoring, gratitude as having measurable effects on well-being. How can we weave these things into our daily lives?
One of the things we found about resilient people is that they take intentional effort to feel better. And one of the ways that we can do that is small moments every day in our lives. And one of the cool resources I found for everyone is called the Big Joy Project. It's done by UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco, where they are measuring and studying happiness and what helps people have the greatest change with the least amount of like effort. What's the minimal effort to make a big change in your life? And what you should do is just go to the website. It's if you participate, you're part of their research, and it's wonderful. It's implementing all of the things that we're talking about today in small micro doses, like less than 5 minutes a day for 7 days. And they're also asking you to talk about how you're feeling for each of these small activities. And you yourself will see how your body is responding and how you actually feel better. And how at the end of the week, you'll feel so much different, like you're in a different state of being compared to the beginning of the week, all because of these small micro acts of joy. And, you know, the point here is that anyone has access to this. So if you just go ahead and do the Big Joy Project, you can see what that means and you can implement it in your own daily life.
I loved day 2 when it was, I think it's called like a moment for awe. And it was a video of all these beautiful scenes of
My day
Yosemite.
2 was a gratitude list. And then they wanted me to either go into detail or explain how finishing my list made me feel. And although I had a toddler literally interrupting me throughout it, when I was able to go back and do it, I would just like get teary-eyed all over again. Like that's how impactful it was for me, even in the middle of, you might say, adversity. I was able to reach those parts of my brain that just want attention.
Yeah, I will say that I was actually in a state of stress when I got the email to do day 2. And watching that video, A Moment for Awe, did take me to a different place, did make me feel better, more joyful, more in
Yeah,
awe. So I can definitely relate to that.
I love that. Yeah. While I was distracted with my toddler, my brain just kept going back to what else am I grateful for? What else am I
Yeah,
grateful for? And it was just so cool because I was distracted for like 2 hours. So I was just going through all these cool things that I want to talk about in my list. And it's just a nice way to keep my brain working on something that's going to help me in the long term versus
yeah,
just maybe being distracted by the fact that I'm distracted.
right. Hmm. I've heard of neurosustainability, and it is a very interesting concept. Can you explain what that is and also let us know how our physical environments affect our brain's ability to foster joy and resilience?
Yes. One of the cool things that we can control in our environment is adding plants to the room that we're in more often. And so the idea is like why is this even a thing that our environment can have such a big effect on us? Like having plants, having sunlight, having a social network that we include in the environments that we're at, like at home or someplace that we frequent, at work, having a healthy social life. These are all parts of our environment, like people, things, our thoughts, objects, right? And they were thinking that evolutionarily speaking, human beings in the beginning were outside. So our brains adapted to doing well out in the environment, in the world, in nature. And so bringing any of that into our home does make significant changes. And it's just like, it just brings a level of pleasantness. In the background of your brain, you're enjoying some pleasantness. So just having a beautiful environment does make a difference. And nature is really the key for that.
One thing that I wanted to ask that we talked about in our initial meeting was the indicators that our brain is telling us that we need certain things.
Sometimes when we crave or want something and we're like a hug, that could be a sign of your that part of your brain being like, all right, we need to cultivate some serotonin right now. Go outside, take a walk, call your family member, and just cry it out. So when we have the urge to just be with somebody, that's your brain telling you that's what you need. Another one would be like, just sit down and sit next to your partner. And maybe you're both so exhausted that you can't even like chat from a long day. But just being in close proximity alone increases your oxytocin. And that just, it just releases that fog of stress from the day. Another thing, like my toddler, sometimes he just needs to run. Just run. I'm like, run, child. But what I see when that happens is, oh, he's trying to burn the energy, but for him to get that out of his body is to prepare for being able to focus later. So like when you have like this urge to just go, to just move, or maybe it's actually an actual sense of anxiety, just go for a run. So when you're anxious, what's happening? What's the amygdala doing? She's making your heart rate go fast. And we get that feeling in our chest. So use it. When is a healthy time that we actually should have that feeling? It's when we're running, when we're actually exerting energy. So if you're just, okay, fine, amygdala, I'm gonna go for a run. I'm gonna use what you're telling me to do. So then go for the run, use the heart rate to your advantage. And then when you're done, it'll stop.
DeMarty, if someone listening to this could only start with one science-backed habit to cultivate more happiness, what would you recommend?
One of the cool things that absolutely anyone, including my 2-year-old toddler, can do that will serve you for the rest of your life is to label the emotion, take a deep breath, implement your coping skill. So, of all the wonderful things we just talked about, these three in combination show the highest, fastest, it's like the fastest way to get your heart rate back down to the baseline, to help your amygdala just like chill out. Labeling the emotion, I'm angry. Just saying that alone, it's kind of like the amygdala in your brain is like, finally, you're listening. Jeez. That's so cool because as soon as you can validate it, then it like starts to calm down. So it's like, I hear you, girl. I'm angry. And then immediately, like the heart rate and the breathing start to slow down. And then the next thing is we take a deep breath. I trigger this in my 2-year-old, and he started doing this when he was like 15 months old. I ask him to smell the flowers, and it was like automatic. I was like, oh snap, it works. So when he's upset or going through anything that's a struggle, like a difficult emotion, sadness, anger, frustration, whatever, I will prompt him to label his emotion. How are you feeling? And, before he had words to say this, I would say, are you feeling angry? And then I would say it for him. I'm angry. And then eventually when he started talking, he would say, I'm angry. And then I'd say, what should we do? We should smell the flowers. And so now he smells the flowers. And he'll do this on his own when I'm not there, which is great. He'll say, deep breath, and he'll take a deep breath. And then his coping skill is to sing a song of his choice. We can do that too. We have that skill. And sometimes me as the parent, I'm like, I got to teach him this. And then I find myself going through a stressful moment and I'm not implementing the thing that I teach. and then one day I was like, stop it, amygdala. And I said, I hear you. I'm angry. And then I took a deep breath. And even just doing that, taking a deep breath felt like such relief because I was finally addressing something that I've been ignoring all day. And then my coping skill was to call my sister and just talk about it. And I hadn't given myself time to even just do that. So those three things: label it, take a deep breath, implement your coping skill. And that alone also builds all the resources that we just talked about today for long-term ability to have emotional regulation and feel happiness.
One of the questions I'm asking every guest on this theme is, outside of prescription, outside of guidance for others, what is happiness to you?
Happiness to me is enjoying how messy my car is and how messy my house is. Because I know that I've wanted this for the longest time, and having a messy house is evidence that I have a family that lives in it. Yeah. So when I see a messy car, I'm like, oh, that's good. I love seeing sand. That's because we went to the beach last week. I love seeing dog hair because we took the dog with us. I didn't have time to clean it, but I love seeing it there. It reminds me of that. And so it's just, that's one way that we can reframe something to find the silver lining. And like now I get happy feelings when my car's a mess and I'm like, oh, what a great thing that I get to do. I get to enjoy just cleaning my car, thinking about my family and how all this crazy mess happened. And in the middle of it happening, the next time that it happens, I don't have like anger feelings. It just feels like it's supposed to be this way. That's happiness, my messy car.
Oh, I love that reframe. That is beautiful. Well, this has been such an amazing, inspiring, and thought-provoking conversation. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to leave us with?
I would love to ask you, you're in a very unique position. You're interviewing several different people on how they analyze, perceive, experience happiness. How have you been like, what are you taking out from all of this?
I think so far what I've received is that happiness is literally all an inside job. Whether we're talking about the science of it or the practicality of it or the energetics of it, every single perspective shift that I've dived into for these interviews, it's all been about it being something that's cultivated from the inside. Nothing outside of you can truly make you happy and make you joyful.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad that you're doing all the work. I'm so glad that everything that we've both been through has brought us exactly to this moment where we can be in a place to share what it took to get here and that it's available to everyone else as well.
DeMarty, where can people find you if you want to be found?
I have a YouTube channel. My handle name is my first and last name, DeMarty Burgos. And I also have an email address you can reach out to me if needed. That's behappy@demartyburgos.com. And you spell my name DeMartyBurgos.
Ah, you're absolutely amazing, DeMarty. Do you feel complete?
Yes, I do. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, can we just pause for a moment and give our amygdalas a big, fat, juicy hug? Now, I don't know about you, but my girl has definitely been working overtime. And knowing that I can send her love and calm her feels so good. And this conversation with Dr. DeMarty Burgos reminds us that happiness isn't just an abstract concept. It's a biological experience we can intentionally cultivate. When we understand what's happening in the brain and body, it gives us the tools to create sustainable joy and resilience, even when life feels heavy. And next week, we're going to keep the conversation going and shift our perspective on happiness by exploring its energetic dimension. With Raquel V. Saga, we talk about how happiness is a frequency that can open you up to more ease, flow, and joy in everyday life. And I'll just say that the conversation we had was so healing. I promise you do not want to miss it. And if you feel inspired to, please like, share, and comment so we can keep the perspective shifts coming. Seekers, I had so much fun with y'all today. Until next time, hang in there.